What do we got right behind you, Bill?
This is the new truck that we just built for the 2019 series, and it started out as a dragon slash dinosaur slash mythical creature. We weren't sure what it was going to be. About a year ago, I contacted a guy named Jason Becker with Master Faster and asked him if he could, start whipping up a sculpture for me. So we, exchanged some pictures and some drawings and my little cartoon, stick figure drawings that I usually send most of my designers when I have these ideas. And we came up with, a rendering that looks a lot like this. He built out of clay. Really, the idea had kind of stopped there, and we didn't pursue. It wasn't until October when we were on our way home, and just with a long drive, we had plenty of time to think coming back from Phoenix. So I decided, man, I think this is something I want to do. So I was talking with Jason on the trip home, and asked him, hey, do you think you'd be interested in coming out and helping me build the life-size one? And he just thought, that'd be great, because he wanted to learn some of the processes, because he hadn't really done this tile stuff that we do, so he wanted to do it. So I asked my wife if she'd get the plane tickets for him, and then that was when she kind of asked, well, when did we decide to do that? Oh, yesterday. But so I mean, it was a project that we didn't even have on our books to do this year. It was actually going to be down the road. And then it happened so fast. Like when we built the Bulldog monster truck, that was something that took us 3 months to be able to create, from the sculpture to the wood to the foam to the actual plug process. We did all this thing within 6 days. With Jason out here, it was we started out with the wood again, and then he just took a Sharpie and he started drawing the design on the plywood where he thought the mouth and the eyes, and I went right behind him with the foam, and we use a 2-part foam, just like home insulation foam. And you have an A and a B, and it's all pressurized with nitrogen, and you just start spraying it, and it would start growing. It's about 4 or 5 times the size that it grows. So we just start spraying all the different areas. Like this area, I would just do coat after coat after coat, and start building up, and then we could add the teeth in there, and we just started shaping it. It's a very soft foam. It's only a pound and a quarter foam, so you can shape it with 36 grit sandpaper, so you don't even need to have special tooling, or it's not like dealing with clay or a real dense foam that you need a mill or anything like that for. You can sand it, or you can even just take fingers and chunk areas out if you want. Some of the stuff we would do with a sawzall, like cutting the teeth, we'd spray the foam and just take a sawzall and get the rough shape in with a sawzall. But the problem with that foam being not very dense is you could fingerprint it and dent it. So at one point you can't build a mold off of it because it's still soft. You couldn't kneel on anything and roll it out. So then what we do is we cover the whole thing with a layer of fiberglass. Now we have a hard shell, but it's coarse. It's fiberglass. It's got ripples and bumps, and it's not super smooth. So then we sand it again, and then it took 15.5 gallons of Bondo to try to get the smooth finish on top of the fiberglass. Once that was done, we were able to prime it, wet sand it, prime it again, wet sand it, and then we have the part that we want to be able to build our part. And then we start the mold process. So it's waxing it, doing the gel coat, the fiberglass, and you see on our Straight Up Racing Facebook, you'll see that we have wood blocks that are glued to it, to be able to separate the molds. It ended up having to be a 9-piece mold, which is the most pieces that we've ever had to do on a monster truck body. But just with all the contours and the teeth and the eyebrows and everything, it just took a lot of work to be able to make sure that our hard work wasn't gonna just be stuck inside the mold. So we had to make this thing to where we knew we could pop each panel off. Probably the hardest part on the body is this little area right here. It gets trapped in the mold, so that was the hardest part to be able to get out of the mold. We're still not quite finished. We have arms that are going to go on it as well. We've got the arms are done, the molds have been finished. We're just waiting on the foam because we want to do a flexible foam. We ordered the foam and we got 2 parts of B, but no A. So luckily, it's a friend of ours was in the shop, and he actually caught it right before we get ready to start to pour, because you measure it out and you mix 4 ounces of A with 4 ounces of B, and then you get 60 seconds to mix it together, and you pour it in, and then it expands. Well, if you only have B and B, all you have is slimy goo. So I'm glad he caught that. But it's like right now we're building a part. We're just building the door itself because we want to paint it up and use it as a giveaway off of Facebook. Just something else. It's another creation. It's another addition to the Straight Up Racing team.
And then with this monster truck here, I noticed you could spit fire with it in the front when you had it on the Facebook posting.
You know, we were trying to figure out what we were even going to name this thing, because we didn't even have, you know, an idea if it was a dragon or if it was a dinosaur or what kind of creature this thing was. It was just an idea that we just started drawing all these things up. And it was actually Christmas vacation. I asked my nephew, I'm like, hey, why don't you name this thing for me? You know, just jokingly. Well, then a couple of days later, he called and said, hey, I think it should be called Spitfire. And I instantly liked it. So, you know, I was like, all right, we'll call it Spitfire. Well, then with a name like that, I was like, man, I can't have a truck called, I just figured that we're going to be at pit party and people ask, oh, it's called Spitfire. They're going to say, well, does it spit fire? So I'm like, well, I can't do that and not, you know, have some kind of a fire system. So we contacted Mike West with Megasaurus and Transaurus to ask him how he does his fire stuff, because I've seen guys that have tried to do fire and sometimes it'll light, sometimes it won't, you know, sometimes it's a little fire, and Megasaurus is very consistent. It always has, you know, the fire that it needed. So I asked him about how he did some of his drawings, but his stuff is, you know, 30-foot fireballs. So I didn't want to singe the eyebrows off of anybody. So we had to take his drawings and, you know, condense them into smaller stuff, which means smaller orifices, smaller nozzles. You know, so trying to find off-the-shelf parts that he would use, they didn't make in the smaller sizes that we needed. So that was where you seen, like on our Facebook, we took the Miller welder tips, because, you know, we made those to where those can be our nozzles, because we're going to control those with an 023 nozzle or an 045 nozzle from a bigger welder, but everything came from a Miller welder. That way we can change how big of a pilot light we want or how big of a big shot we want. You know, and the other day I just couldn't wait. You know, we're having a timing system built for it, you know, that, you know, you flip on the switch and then the pilot will automatically kick on with the electronics that light it. You know, and I just couldn't wait for that anymore. So we just had, you know, a battery out with wires over here holding this way, just because I wanted to test it. And I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store just shooting the fire. It was like, oh, this is gonna be fun.
I mean, this monster truck, it looks the most unique monster truck that you have so far as the fire and what it looks like, the red and everything like that.
You know, and
what's your opinion on that?
You know, bringing back on that, you know, like when it comes time for doing the colors, you know, I was so stuck on, you know, what do you do for color wise? You know, do you do, you know, red, or do you do a brown dragon, or do you whatever? And it was just like, man, you can't have fire and not, you know, be red. It's kind of hard to be a blue dinosaur or a blue dragon and trying to spit fire. So we just did the red, and then like the texture. It's very easy. I mean, I just take a piece of, you know, poster board from like Staples, or, you know, we got it from Fred Meyer, and I just cut all these different shapes out in this poster board. And all I did is, once I did the base color of like a pinkish red, then I took the darker red, and you hold the cardboard over it. You can just dust. You can go a little, you know, heavier if you want. So any of the spots where I figured that the sun naturally would be sitting, I did a light, you know, scales. Any part that was going to be on the underside, I did a little thicker coat of paint on it. So I just did different colors, and then I accented it with some black and some spots. And I mean, it was a very simple paint job. It was just, you know, it was 8 different colors, but it was literally a piece of cardboard and a normal paint gun that, you know, I was able to paint this whole thing with. So it gives it those good characters. You know, now that the straight up racing team has got to the size that it is, you know, we don't have to focus so much on growing the size of the team. Now we get to focus on making, you know, the quality and each part, you know, unique, you know, and that's where I'm starting to have more fun. You know, like the new Rockstar chassis that we're building, we can spend time with it instead of trying to build 2 trucks in one winter, you know, like what we did. Now I can spend, you know, winter and focus on one custom piece, you know, building different housings and a different here and different there. So I mean, that's, the straight up racing team is going to change quite a bit, you know, in different ways, just because now we have that time to put more, you know, time and quality into everything, instead of just trying to grow the team as fast as we could.
And then you got the Rockstar right behind us. Would you like to share anything about that? Is it kind of where you wanted to be at, or you're still messing around with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's still in fab station. Like the other day, I just started working back on it again, and we got to the point where now we have to build all the housings. But since the transfer case and everything is at an angle to be able to get the low ride height, the drive lines run beside the oil pan. So that means we had to build offset differentials. Well, that means I got to make sure everything's going to clear. So I built our own sheet metal housings, but they're literally out of sheet metal right now. They're only 14 gauge. That way we can, you know, they're light, we can move them around, but you know, they're so light that the carrier won't, you know, support in there. So I've got to build like a little jig area that'll hold the carrier on little wheels, and we can roll it around just to make sure that 4-link bars are going to clear drive lines, because it's a totally custom build that, you know, isn't your traditional monster truck where you know that you can just bolt everything just like all the other trucks and it's going to work.
And with you make a lot of stuff yourself, the shocks and everything, a lot of stuff that you guys make yourself in-house. How much money would that save you guys, or whatever, you know?
There's such a variation with a monster truck. I mean, you can build a monster truck for, you know, $100,000, or you can spend $300,000 on a monster truck, just depending on the type of parts, quality of parts. Some people think that more expensive parts are better than others. You know, I mean, we still try to build a lot of our trucks on the simple program, where we can try to make sure that either we can build them in-house, or we can get them, you know, overnighted from a place like Summit, or you know, some of the dealers out there. You know, when you start having custom parts made, that's when, if something happens, you're at the mercy of either having to have, you know, a half a dozen of them in your trailer because you don't know how many you're going to break on a hard weekend, or you're out for the next week because your custom parts still aren't built. So, you know, we have a parts room that's full of from everything from shock pistons to shock shafts to blower motors, transmissions on the shelf. So we try to make everything that we can't just get overnight, we have in stock. So there's different, you know, types of every kind of show out there. You know, you've got Circus Olays, you've got 10 different styles. You've got, you know, Monster Jam, you've got, you know, 10 different styles of monster trucks. But in the gist of it, we try to keep up with the same end of the sport as everybody else. You know, when they start doing the reverse, you know, tricks, well, we were doing that, what, 15 years ago, you know, and then we've stopped doing that. Well, now they're doing all those. So it's like, all right, well, I guess we can start doing those again at our, so it's things that you see, like the backflips. You know, it took us a while before we were confident to start doing the backflips, so we could see the ramps that were, you know, available, that you could build, that were consistent, because ultimately we want to make sure all of our shows are consistent. You know, I don't want to have one show that's a great show, you know, that we had carnage and backflips and good wheelies, and then the next show where we couldn't do anything because, you know, the ramps weren't, or the dirt wasn't there, or whatever. I try to make every show where it's going to be consistent, where we have the same quality of a show. It shouldn't matter if you're in a big town or a little town. You know, a monster truck can perform, you know, the same. You know, it's just a matter of the driver if they're, you know, willing to do it. You know, it's a monster truck can wheelie in a small arena, or it can wheelie in a big field. It can, you know, jump a lot of air off of a little jump or a big jump. You can do multiple things. It's just a matter of drivers, really. The monster trucks, once you get all the right parts and you know, the right quality and safety equipment, it's down to the driver.
Then when you go to these meetings and stuff, and you want to book shows, but I mean your schedule is full each and every year. I mean, when these racetrack owners, when they show up and ask you about your show and what do you do and all this kind of stuff, and a lot of these racetrack owners or promoters want something that's not racing, but they want to bring little ones in and everything like that. What do they say when they walk up?
Well, you know, what a racetrack has to realize is they don't just have a racetrack. You know, some guys are adamant that, you know, racetracks are for race cars. Well, it's not a racetrack. It's a entertainment facility. You know, they have a place that people can come. They've got concessions. They have, you know, their beers. They've got seats that they can seat thousands of people. To have that kind of facility that you only want to use it for one thing, you're tripping over dollars. I mean, most of these racetracks are losing money left and right because they can be holding events like concerts, or they can be doing mud bogs, or they can do monster truck shows, or whether it's just doing go-karts during the day or driving practice. I mean, there's lots of tracks that capitalize their facilities as an entertainment complex, and then there's some of the tracks that only use it as a racetrack, and you can usually see the difference between, say, like Evergreen. You know, they've got 300 different events that happen in a year. You know, well, there's not that many weekends out there. What's there, 52 weekends? So that means they're obviously doing everything during the week as well. So there's, when you meet those people, or sometimes you have to get those, you know, them over that hurdle to realize that, you know, they have a facility that they can bring more people into their, you know, their complexes. Likewise, that, you know, we've all, you know, realized that monster trucks bring in a totally different crowd than a speedway. So, and that's what they want to see is they want a different kind of crowd. They don't want to just, you know, spend, you know, or use up all the people that they're speedway people that always come to their speedway. They don't want to just bleed them dry and try to get them to come every single weekend. You know, they need to have a separate crowd over here that wants to come and see a concert, a separate crowd that comes over here to see a monster truck show, a separate crowd that comes to see monster, or you know, a mud box. So if they can cater to all these different types of people, because I know I don't go to, I don't watch the Super Bowl tomorrow. You know, tomorrow's Super Bowl, I couldn't even tell you who's going to be in it. I can't. Yeah. You know, I went to Lowe's today and they asked, "You going to watch the Super Bowl tomorrow?" I'll be honest, no, I'm going to be working in the shop. I don't even know who's playing in the Super Bowl. You know, unless it's, you know, Seahawks, I'm not really interested. You know, so I mean, but the next guy, you know, will, you know, spend his whole, you know, month's wages to go to the Super Bowl, you know, and then the next guy will do everything and have a big party. I mean, you don't know what person's into what, and nobody can ever say that they have all the right answers. So, you know, by talking to these speedways, I just have to get them convinced that, you know, there is a market out there. We can bring people to them, and now that, you know, we're about 90% rebooking. You know, where after they do a show and they realize the people that they have, and you know, that they sell way more candy and more popcorn and, you know, licorice at a monster truck show, but they sell more beer at their speedway races. Well, that's okay, because people come to bring a family event. They're not going to get liquored up and, you know, hooting and hollering. They're going to, you know, treat their family to a good night. So, you know, instead now they're, you know, spending more money on their concessions. So it's a totally different thing for a lot of people to learn. But after they get through that first one, it's the hardest one for them because it's so new to them. And after that, they fall in love with it. And we're just year after year. If you look at our schedule, we've done the same shows for 8-9 years in a row, just same speedways. We have our yearly contracts that we just go bang, 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 bang over and over again.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep, not a problem. You're always welcome.
Okay.